And welcome back to another episode of Pokemon Knowledge. On today's episode, we got a pretty exciting guest. If you guys are not familiar with Will, he has a YouTube channel called the Lab TCG. He's put out some pretty awesome content as of late. He took a little bit of a hiatus, but he's back. And he had, and one of the things I love about this channel, and one of the things I try to do with these interviews is bring people on with different experiences. And Will definitely comes with the way more of that grind mindset. He has a little bit difference of the way he interacts with the hobby, definitely on the playability side and stuff like that. So I'm extremely excited to finally get to pick his brain a little bit on a one-on-one interview. But with that said, first off, I just want to say, Will, thanks again for coming on the channel. And for anybody out there who may not know who you are, feel free to introduce yourself.
Sure, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you, PK, so much for having me on. Been a pleasure. I've watched a little bit of your stuff here and there, and I've been lurking for a long time. So I'm happy to kind of come out and talk and have a good conversation. As far as myself and my background in the hobby, I think, like most people, I was a very young kid. Discovered Pokemon cards when I was in like fifth grade. I think probably the difference for me from many others, though, would be my collecting really started in like platinum and heart gold instead of more base set era. So more started in that era. The full story there is, ended up collecting and whatnot up until about fifth grade. I was living in California at the time. My parents had a job change, moved to the East Coast, dropped Pokemon, said I'll never get into this thing again. And 2 years later, I'm in seventh grade. My younger brother and I walk into a Kmart, which, now I don't know if they're even in business anymore, but walk into a Kmart and he picks up a Xerneas theme deck. So, not a booster pack or anything. He picks up an actual starter deck. And, I was like, that's dumb. Like, why would you do that? I think at this point I was into Minecraft and stuff like that. And, he ends up explaining to me later that night that there's a whole game behind the Pokemon cards. And that kind of caught my interest. So we tried to follow the rules of the actual trading card game, with the only exception of having a 60 card deck. And we kind of both just fell in love with it. And from there, I've always had a little bit of a entrepreneurial flame in me. So I started trying to figure out ways to make money with the cards. Legendary Treasures was really popular at the time. And I saw like people were pulling ultra rares left and right. Didn't know they weren't worth anything. Yeah, Legendary Treasures. So really got into like watching YouTube videos and seeing people open the packs. And lo and behold, the starter deck had a pamphlet in it that was talking about Pokemon leagues and how you could go to local card stores and kind of play the game, get to know other people, get involved in the community. And I ended up meeting some people that took me on a long journey that resulted in me becoming the 11th ranked player in North America before the pandemic happened. So it's been a long 8 years since I've gotten back into the hobby, but that's kind of the brief introduction.
That's awesome, man. So you got all the way to rank number 11. So have you been to Worlds and stuff like that?
Yeah, I've been to Worlds, qualified 4 times, attended 3 times.
Awesome. What years were you at Worlds?
17, 18, 19, and then what would have been London in 2022, but the invite was earned in 2020.
Oh, okay. So I already know the answer to this because we've talked a little bit. I know you just did Baltimore, or you're gonna do Baltimore. So obviously you're still pretty active in the game today in the competitive scene. Do you expect yourself to go to Worlds in Japan?
Yeah, so actually, I was in North Carolina this past weekend, and it was actually it was the first tournament I've attended in 7 or so months. Unfortunately, the pandemic kind of ended my stint as a player. And, with 2 years off the break at the time, Pokemon was like my main focus. It was my everything as a player and playing the game and being involved with it. And the pandemic was almost like a forced change to stop. And at the time, I was transitioning to like a 4 year college, and I kind of dropped the game altogether, which is where more of the business side started to pick up in my interest in like how do you build a business out of Pokemon cards or make money from them. And really the only reason I go to events now is just to reconnect with so many friends that I've made through that side of the community. So don't play nearly as competitively anymore. But yeah, still try to keep up with some of the players that I know and like have built long lasting friendships with.
Yeah, and I know just like the name of your YouTube channel, I was looking around on your website before this, and you talk about where the name the Lab TCG comes from, and it was pretty much just I forget which event you said you were at, but you guys were all just sitting at a long table in between rounds, like nothing competitive was going on, and it was just people like brainstorming different decks that they can use at the event. You know, what are other people going to be playing? Kind of like really big brain in it, stuff like that, and you were just you ended up calling your channel the lab because you said that that table was sort of like a lab. So I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty awesome. And I loved like that backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. The full story there is the 2019 international championships in North America, and playing Pokemon, I had met so many people internationally, and like not only domestically across the U.S. but also internationally from Brazil, Brazil, Europe, Australia, like even some players from Japan. And for this particular group, the friends in the US that I were testing with, and that's basically just like trying out different decks and tech cards and different things like that. We wanted to kind of expand our horizons and really get to know some of the international players that we had met playing. So we got an Airbnb with like 14 or 15 people, and we kind
Wow.
of just, it was like a melting pot of just all sorts of different players from across the world, mainly US, but a lot from Europe, some from Australia, some from South America. And it ended up, the table that you're describing, this Airbnb just had this very long, like cafeteria style table. And there was this little like section, I'm kind of like poorly describing it, but a little like section as if there could be a sliding glass door. And I ended up waking up late because I like to get my beauty sleep in. And I come down, it's like 10 or 12, and every single player is like 1v1 playing against each other. And, I made this joke of like, open this fake sliding glass door. And it's like, I'm in the lab, I'm ready to test. And then I like sat down and started playing. And from there, the US based group that I had been testing with the whole time, we ended up doing really well at tournaments, and we started to nickname ourselves the lab, and it kind of just caught in the community. So before the pandemic kind of ended everything for a little bit, the testing group that I was a part of, and when we would succeed at tournaments, everyone was like, oh, the lab's done it again. Like they've won this tournament with whatever. So that's exactly where the name comes from. And the Pikachu with the lab coat was commissioned by someone I met playing the game as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Uh, so yeah, you said obviously you have your group of players, and you said at one point you were ranked as high as number 11 in the world, which is just absolutely crazy. But out of that group, were there others like really high ranked players, especially you were saying from like the American scene?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way that Pokemon does it is there's ratings for each of the big like land masses. So North America has one, Europe has one, South America has one. Asia is a different competitive circuit, but they end up playing in the World Championships as well. And then Australia also has a circuit. So basically, the like status symbol, I guess, is if you're in the top 16 of North America, you end up getting a paid trip to the World Championships and an automatic day two. So most of the players that I was friends with, that was our goal, was we wanted to be at the top 16 players at the end of the season, basically, to be able to qualify. And depending on where you were at in that placement over the year, you would get paid trips to some of the international championships as well.
Okay.
So a lot of the friends that I tested with at the time were in the top 16. And then it kind of got weird with how the pandemic shook things up. I didn't end up returning to play once the pandemic came back, but they kind of picked up the season where it left off. And I think um, three of the people that I ended up used to work with ended up as like number one North America, number two North America, something like
Oh
that.
wow,
So a lot of
that's
the
great.
players that I know are still to this day crushing the game, and I'm a big fan and friend of a lot of the other players that are in that list as well.
That's awesome, man. People are asking like, what's the deck you playing right now? People are asking if you're playing the Lugia deck or.
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to look at the chat, so I'll try and look to the right a little bit more too. In North Carolina, my friend Rahul Reddy and I actually played this Mewtwo V Union control deck, and I've always liked playing control decks as more slower paced. They're trying to win on like the non-traditional win condition, whether that's decking the opponent out or having them concede because they have no more resources. But
Yep.
in my previous tournaments, I had never actually just committed to playing the deck. So going back into a tournament, a friend of mine, Isaiah Bradner, told me like, "Oh, you should, you guys should play this deck." And because I had no idea what was going on in the current meta, I just kind of decided Yeah, sure. I'll figure it out. So I played 7 games against Lugia to try and figure out how to beat that deck, and ended up running with it. And um, it the deck was very good. I think there was just a lot more of the Lost Box deck than I was expecting, which
Yeah.
is like Comfey, Sableye, specifically the Drapion V with Mirage Gates is something the deck can't really beat, and hit a lot of really good players like Azul Garcia Griego and Isaiah Williams that were piloting that deck. So it was a rough tournament on the playing standpoint, but a really great time overall.
That's good, man. So now we get to the point. So you're really into the competitive scene now. I know you've also now branched out. You went and you got distributor agreements, and I'm guessing you got these. You got in with distributor pre 2020. So what did that start off as? Was that something real small, just to kind of sell cards here and there to your friends, maybe to just get product for yourself to open, the build decks, stuff like this? Like, and now I look behind you and I'm looking at all these different just 5 row box. You got monster box upon monster box of just set after set of just bulk. And we'll definitely get to what the bread and butter your business is, which I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but it is that bulk route and that grind route, and obviously play set stuff like this. But so let's go back to the beginning, like when you got in with your first distributor and stuff like that, and how were you selling that real original allotment?
Sure, absolutely. So this would have been, I think, a year after I had discovered the trading card game side,
That was
and
pretty fast on timeline wise.
yeah, I've always kind of had an entrepreneurial side of me. I've resold stuff from garage sales for years. I don't know, like it started with consoles and like game systems, and you know, asking people at garage sales, hey, do you have like Nintendo 64s or Xboxes and whatnot, like, and then buying them for cheaper, and then going to like video game stores and reselling them. Like I didn't even know eBay existed at the time.
Wow.
Excuse me. And I don't know, I to me, I think I like when I was younger, I always wanted to just open as much product as possible. And I think I saw YouTubers that like it seemed they just had an unlimited budget or an unlimited amount of product. And I was trying to figure out like how do you actually do that? And the player's family that I met that kind of got us into all the competitive side, the dad was selling sealed products out of his trunk basically to some of the people that attended the league or anything like that. And I think my curiosity just kind of got to me, like how can you not own a store but sell cards to
Yeah.
people in the local area? So after I convinced my parents to kind of go forward with this idea with me, I asked him if I could, and this guy had stopped selling stuff. I asked him, hey, like, can I buy all of your stuff to then try and do something like this myself?
And what
And
timeline is this right now? This is
so this would have been 15, probably 2016. This would have
okay.
been,
So a
um,
lot of pretty much all XY stuff then.
yeah, XY. Probably the most recent step would have been like Steam Siege. Would have been
Okay. Oh,
the
so end to
most,
XY then. All right.
yeah. So I had done snow shoveling and raking and all sorts of stuff to like try and raise money, and I just kind of went to him and was like, hey, I'd love to buy whatever excess inventory you have, because he had stopped at the time, and I was wondering like if I could kickstart it up. And he actually ended up doing me a solid, and he said like, look, I admire um like the ambition to kind of do something like this. I'd be willing to front all the product to you as long as you return the cost to me. So got super lucky with an amazing opportunity, and um so that's how I got that. Then once I kind of dried that up, I asked him like, how did you even get all this stuff in the first place? And that's when I learned about distribution. So I got in with Southern Hobby through my parents like way long ago. When COVID hit, jumping forward a little bit, when COVID hit, I actually didn't have any of my distribution accounts, and I wanted to reopen them. And I think with Southern Hobby, the sales rep that I had remembered me, and I was kind of like, hey, I'm trying to do this again. Can I reinstate my account? And then I also ended up reaching out to Peach State Hobby Distribution. And I think timing wise, I just got super lucky with
Hmm.
where they were like not closed off quite yet, because I think I did this stuff in March 2020, right before all that stuff would have kind of
Yeah, right before it
happened.
popped. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, March 2020 was a good time too, because you still probably had access to that end of that Sun and Moon sets, that team up, Unbroken Bonds, Unified Minds, Cosmic Eclipse, all 4 of those sets, because then the market just went and did what it did.
Yeah.
So when you were buying this product from distribution, were you looking to sell it as sealed product, or were you looking at to break it down and go the grinding, the singles route, and going TCG player stuff like that?
Yeah. So like the business as it stands, the Lab TCG started as strictly TCG player and eBay and just selling singles. I started most of what I had with like $500 cash and just kept snowballing and snowballing and snowballing and very classic flipping. So sealed product wasn't even really on my thought process. It just kind of
Okay.
happened. And to be honest, I never really had the capital to like leverage having a distributor appropriately. I would say even today, I don't have the capital to leverage having a distribution account quite right. Like brick or e-commerce, so allocations usually hurt pretty bad. But yeah, it's for me, singles has been a big part of what I do. And early on, I think I was super attached to the investing in the Pokemon cards. So I actually held most of the stuff that I was buying from distributors anyways, and then would only unload if I thought I needed more like liquid capital to acquire collections or anything.
So when you said you were pretty into the investing in Pokemon, so what do you mean by that? Were you going after like vintage stuff, WotC stuff? Because you said you got back in at Heart Gold, Soul Silver, or
Mhm.
you were, and then that timeline. So what was a big part of what you consider like your investment portfolio of Pokemon? And is that something that, and how were you able to differentiate that? Because now you are, in a way, three things. You are a collector, you're an investor, and you're a player. How do you like, because you have to compartmentalize each one of those, right? Because they have different needs. But
Mhm.
now, as for your investing aspect, what was like the main part of your collection, and what were you going after when you were looking at the investment stuff?
Yeah. So I've actually never, and this could be a downfall to be honest. That like I've actually never had a strategy, and a lesson I learned early on with collectibles, and this is kind of the philosophy I've gone by. I don't talk about it too much on my channel. Um, is anything sealed appreciates, and I learned this really early, at least from my perspective. That I think one time I like stumbled upon some fossil rocket base set packs at like an antique store, like super random. It just
Hmm.
happened. And I was looking for the quick buck. I ended up, selling them on eBay for way more than I bought them for. But, I got like $900 out of it or something. And now, that could have been a lot more. And so that on top of some of the other stuff that I learned with like, even though I was fronted all that product at the time I made, whatever I made, it would be worth a lot more now. And as well as kind of the time period of when COVID hit, I started to get really into personal finance and even just like finance as a broader topic, studying through school, or there was kind of just a boom in the interest in finance as a space on YouTube as well. So I consumed a lot of YouTube. And to me, the strategy was simply this is sealed product. If my time horizon is long enough, I expect it to go up. And at the time with the distribution accounts, it would have been anything Sword and Shield. I think I got a few um, team up. It's not team up. It's the second one. Unbroken Bonds. A
Yep.
few Unbroken Bonds. A few Ultra Prism boxes. Just the tail end of like things that the distributors had extra on hand. But
Yeah.
I would say most of the sealed product collection ended up being like that Sword and Shield era stuff.
So how did you do with like Evolving Skies and stuff like that? The products that went, crazy.
Yeah, I think through doing all this stuff, I've made some relationships where I would just like get the stuff in from the distributors and then just sell it off to kind of feed the singles side. And then even recently, I made a YouTube video about like how I sold my Evolving Skies case for a bunch of money. And so going against the philosophy there for some of those things, and I have a reason why I did that. I'm not sure if it's right. I kind of wanted to do it as an experiment, but for Evolving Skies, did really well. There were a few points where I sold it for over $200 a box, and then now I think TCG player low is like 400 or something.
Yeah, it's
So
crazy. It's like
yeah,
300.
absolutely insane. So I've just kind of I think one of the things I realized really early on is I started acquiring so much sealed product that the capital side of the business started to just collapse.
Mm.
And I learned pretty early on that you need to make the decision, at least for me, you need to make the decision whether you want to be an investor or you want to be a business. And if you're going to, and I guess you could be an investing business, but if you wanted to like turn the cards over, you can't just hold sealed product. Like there's almost, you need to commit to one of the strategies is kind of what I found out. So that was kind of the idea there.
Fun. I'm sure it's just a internet buffing issue. Right now it says excellent connection for me. Oh, sorry, Will. You lagged out a little bit, but you're good now.
Oh, cool. I think what I was saying is I kind of learned that in order to operate a business with Pokemon cards, you needed the capital to keep turning over. Where if you wanted to do an investing business, you can't really have both at the same time. Or
Yep.
like even with a collection, right? If you are trying to sell cards on the side, but also collect cards that you're acquiring, depending on what your priorities are with it, it might not work out in the end, is I think what I was saying.
So now we get to the point where we'll get to the TCG aspect, or sorry, TCG player aspect of it, and
Sure.
doing that grind. And this is one of the most fascinating things, and I talk about this all the time in the hobby. There's money to be made in Pokemon, and then there's huge profit margins to be made in Pokemon. The only problem is the huge profit margins take substantially more work, and that substantially more work is taken a 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent card and turning that into $1 or $2. So the dollar amounts might not be flashy, but the profit margins for stuff like that is just ridiculous. And I know you've been going that route, and you've been doing some stuff like, I think in your last video you talked about like speculating on judge cards. I know judge cards just recently came back out in
Mhm.
Scarlet and Violet, so they're going to be back in rotation. They're going to be in standard for a while. And I know you've been doing that route. You want to talk a little bit about that sort of grinding? If you guys are looking to sell bulk, by the way, on his website, I didn't link his website, but I will as soon as this video is over. But if you go to the Lab TCG, he's one of the very few people currently buying bulk right now. I think you're what do you got, like 1.5 cents or something like that, and
Mhm.
7 cents for reverses. So you want to go through that route of doing the most ultimate grind in this hobby.
Sure. Yeah, no, for thanks for the shout out. And if you want to learn how to do it too, like I pretty much strictly make content on this stuff too. And you're right, it is 100% a grind. And I think even to this day where I have conflicting priorities outside of the hobby, I'm starting to realize just how much time it actually takes. And
Yeah.
the way I got into it is when I started, I just didn't have a lot of money to play around with. I was investing a lot of this in stocks, so any like personal money I got would go somewhere else. And as I think I kind of mentioned earlier, I started pretty much everything Pokemon business related with like $500 that I just decided to invest in myself and see if I could turn it into a business. And I would scour the internet for information on how people do this stuff. Whether that was selling graded cards or singles or bulk or whatever it was. I just wanted to know, like, how do you run a Pokemon business? Because it was always something that I've wanted to do. And the method I kind of came up with, and also just from knowing people in the space, was that bulk is kind of like the thing at the time no one talked about. And there's a real grind that comes with it, but it's where a lot of money is made on the card store side because they are putting the effort in, and like there's a reason why card stores are buying the stuff they buy. Or sorry, the bulk. So that $500 initially was spent on a collection. The collection went on TCG Player, and it just turned into more. And I ended up talking to a friend of mine. He owns a card store in California, and he turned me on to the idea of selling like Pokemon bulk lots on Amazon. And this was something at the time that there were no YouTube videos about. People didn't talk about it, and also the bar to actually get onto Amazon is pretty high because you do need
Yeah.
a distribution account. Or go ahead.
No. Good. No, keep. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. The Amazon route is an interesting one that I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but it's one a lot of us have like in the back of our heads thought about because the margins can be crazy on
Oh yeah,
Amazon
it,
for
it's
bulk. For
ins-
bulk, I should say.
yeah, it's ridiculous. So talk to him about Amazon. Luckily, I was fortunate enough to actually have the distribution accounts to get through the whole permissions problem. And I just remember talking to him like, and for those of you that don't know, I think around the time I was doing this, I don't necessarily think it's viable anymore. But at the time when I started doing this, 50 commons and uncommons were selling for like, I don't know, $13 or $10. And there's all sorts of fees that Amazon takes. But like, even if you say the fees were 50% of the unit cost, when you're paying at the time 3 cents a card on 50 commons uncommons, so your cost is $1.50, maybe your team bag's a penny or whatever, just round it to like $1.60. And then you're selling the unit for, we'll call it 12. Now you're at $6. after everything's said and done, you're turning $1.60 into 6.
Yeah.
And there's a whole way that Amazon does their shipping to where it's, like $8 for 50 pounds worth of product. So the margins on it just made sense. And I think I might even be downplaying them a little bit. At the time I was doing it, like I got it down to where I could make something around $72 an hour just cranking out bulk lots.
That's
And
that's crazy. You're making $72 an hour dealing with bulk.
and it's not
That's
like, and I want to be very clear, it's not consistent, right? Like
sure.
the bulk you inflow, I had to be the one packaging it. Like it wasn't some elaborate operation I had going on. But there are companies that do this and they do it like that's their whole model. And bulk has changed a lot since then. But
Sure.
by acquiring such a massive amount of bulk cards, and I think I'm still a small fish compared to other people. Like people process hundreds of thousands of cards, and I don't know. I would get like my maximum bulk order I ever did, I think was like 42K, or sorry, 42,000 off one person.
Wow.
And I think the reason that it ended up working better for me is I knew the competitive side of the game. And when you're going through the bulk and you're repackaging some of this stuff, I can be like, oh, here's a Drizzile from Sword and Shield base set, or oh, here's a Hollow Evil Tall from Team Up. Where at the time these cards were like looked at as competitively viable. So the Drizzile was a $5 uncommon, and
Yep.
when you're buying thousands and thousands of these cards, the $5 uncommon adds up. So not only are you making a lot of money on the bulk lot itself, but you're also making money on any card that you as a seller know, oh, this is a $5 uncommon, or like, oh, this card's $1. So just by like going on TCG Player over and over again and looking at these price sheets and stuff, you kind of just develop that mindset. And then as a player, I had almost a little bit of an extra edge where I know, okay, I know Ultra Ball is like a 4 of in every deck. So like this is something I should keep, or, you know, whatever the card may be that's good. And the meta changes all the time. So part of my strategy was I would just keep all the trainer cards because I know at some point if the card's good enough and players decide it's worth playing, then it'll probably increase in price. So I think at the time, that's probably when bulk was at its best. And I'll try and end this part of it quicker. But from there, bulk has changed big time. It's, at the time, I think I was paying 3 cents a card, depending on the person, maybe 3.5. Now I'm paying a penny and a half, and I don't do anything with bulk lots anymore. I sell on TCG Player Direct, and really that's been more of an experiment, trying to make it viable, and it's been going okay so far. But yeah, the bulk lots thing was what I was doing. Then I ended up taking a hiatus for 6 or so months, and the bulk market like almost completely changed. So that's kind of how all that happened.
Yeah. So no, that's awesome. And the fact that you're doing the bulk route, like I got nothing but respect for that. And I hope people could hear like that it's a grind, but the margins are there. But the reasons the margins are there too is because that's a very small percentage of the hobby that's willing to put that work in. But before we went live, we talked about you said you were a big fan of Cardinal Gaming, and Mason's in the chat right now, and he said, "Listen to this man." So Mason's in the chat right now. But you were saying you were watching Mason real early on, no?
Yeah. So hey, Mason. I don't think we've met before, but my name's Will. I've been a lurker for a long time, and I was telling PK before this call, like I think I remember stumbling upon your channel when you had like 15 subscribers, and the reason I stumbled on your channel when you had 15 subscribers was I was just scouring for like anything I could find on the bulk business or like selling singles, and I remember like your mic almost had this like a muffle to it to where the sound level was not appropriate for the YouTube video, and it came across very quiet. But it was just a video of you in a room, like a warehouse type room. I'm like, who is this guy? Like, what is this? And you were talking. I think that I can't remember the video length or what the video was about, but you were like step one on YouTube of trying to figure out how these things actually work. So, super cool to see you in the chat.
Yeah, I'm sure Mason liked to hear that. No, it's always cool though to, and especially that you were probably one of Mason's earliest because he was making the content that was really for you, like trying to, I guess not, you're not technically running like the traditional brick and mortar LGS, but you're still going that entire online route. And no, it's pretty wild, man.
Right. Absolutely. And yeah, I think for the bulk business, I think the reason I still talk about it and try to make it work is I think it's just, if you don't have a lot of capital to start with, I think it's something that can really snowball when you put the work into it. So you're 100% correct, PK. It takes a lot of effort, but the initial effort you put into it, or if you do the work locally to like find collections and you see the end goal, but you don't know how to get there, I feel like bulk is like step one as to how you could start snowballing. And once you make that decision of, okay, you have enough capital from doing this grind, then you can transition to some of these other areas. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on it.
So I know we kind of glossed over it a little bit, and I do want to go back to it, but when the market went, so now you were in a position that a lot of people weren't in 2020, 2021. When the market started going crazy and you're seeing just price increases across the board, and you're looking at your inventory you had at that moment. And I'm guessing your inventory was pretty large, because it sounded like you were still acquiring, but you were just selling, you were more trickling into the market. So what was that initial feeling you got when you kind of saw what prices were doing and you were looking around at your collection? Were you in a position where you could start selling and really taking advantage of that crazy hype market, or were you just busy, or what? Like, walk me through that timeline, because the reason why I like to hear people's experience, because of how we call it like a black swan event. Like, it really was, in a way, like a black swan event, because even if people weren't investors, you were forced to be an investor just because your entire collection exponentially increased overnight. So walk us through, like, how did you feel going through 2020 and trying to do one of the hardest things in the history of this hobby, is navigate 2020?
Yeah. I don't look back on it too much, but looking back on it now, I think I probably got caught up in what like most people would get caught up in, which is just funny to me now. But at the time, as I think I kind of mentioned, I was kind of in a weird situation where I wanted to keep the stuff really desperately, and my time horizon was like 10 years. Like, I didn't want to get rid of any of it because I love the cards. I just like the way sealed product works, and like opening Pokemon cards has never really even been that fun to me, which I think that's kind of crazy to say. But through when you win tournament like boxes all the time, you open packs all the time, and so that part I've never had that like itch to, I have to open this thing. It was more so I knew what it could be worth, or like what could I do with the funds if I sold it now. And when in 2020 I was still learning so much. I studied channels like Pokenomics and like SM Pratt, Mason, like so many channels that were starting to produce videos. ZNG Emporium. I think ZNG Emporium had like a catalog of 23 or so videos where they were like real talk, low view videos where he was giving advice about just life. And I watched all of them. And I was still learning. People were talking about the hype, but it hadn't kind of hit that high mark yet. And I just wrote it out. I just decided, you know what, I'm going to stay the course. I'm not going to sell anything. And I think when I ended up selling stuff is actually when the market started to come down. And most of that was just because I wanted to sell the stuff for more inventory. So I kind of
Okay.
saw it as like, well, it's less than it was now. I think if I sold these Chilling Rain boxes at 100, I could snowball that into something else if I just bought a singles collection. So I played this game with myself where it was like, I'm going to hold this stuff and I'm going to stay steadfast. The price goes all the way up. And I was like, cool, don't care, not selling. And it comes down. And then I was like, all right, now it's close to what I bought it at. Could I just sell these, buy a collection, make 20%, snowball it again, and keep going? So that was kind of the dilemma that I found myself in. And my, excuse me, my collection's probably not as big as you might think it was or think it is. And it's a lot of it's bulk, but I do have a decent amount of sealed product. So yeah, I think that's kind of the answer there is.
So when you say you were when you said you were going after collection buys too, I mean, collection buys aren't just all bulk. I mean, there's got to be
Oh,
hits
sure,
in.
sure.
So, I mean, what about like vintage singles or mid-era singles? And you said you were into the Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Platinum era. So that's, I'm guessing, like, you always kind of feel comfortable with what you're familiar with, right? And if you're familiar with Heart Gold, Soul Silver, and so what was a lot of those collection buys? How are you getting rid of those singles? Or were you going TCG player even on maybe the higher end singles, not just the bulk singles?
Yeah. So when I was buying collections, there was a mix of like modern stuff, or sorry, I didn't mean modern stuff. I meant like higher value stuff. So bulk and non-bulk cards. But going with what you're familiar with, I was super familiar with modern. So it was really just like rinse repeat buying modern collections. I think in one of my earlier videos, I even talked about how the WotC stuff, like it didn't have my interest because I didn't grow up with it. And I admire the cards to this day, but I almost felt like I didn't understand it. Like people were going so crazy for them. They were hundreds of dollars. And I was like, I'll stick to
That's a
what I
good
know.
perspective to have.
Yeah, I'll stick to what I know, and I'll just keep flipping modern stuff. And at the time, it was pretty easy to just like reach out to people on Facebook in some of these groups that I'd become accustomed to through playing the game, and just, oh, you have a collection, like I'll offer you 60% market price on it, and they'll be like, sure, sold, and then take it, flip it, and just keep going. So most of the stuff I was buying would have been modern, and the business model I had was just, I will buy whatever you have. So I'm not going to say no. If you have dice and sleeves and stuff, I might not have a way to get rid of it, but I'll give you a price. And when you combine liquidating people of their ultra rares with their bulk and then anything else, like it's, to me, that's how I got repeat customers, is I was just never say no to anything. And then I just stuck into the lane of what I knew. But every once in a while, an older collection would come up. One of my close friends, I bought collections that are older off friends, stuff like that. So mix of stuff, but primarily the modern.
Do you have that one buy that sticks out above all others where you just like, oh yeah, I did good on that one?
Well, if we go back to like the yard sale days, maybe before everyone knew Pokemon cards had value, there's been a few like $30 collection pickups that had gold stars in them, which
Oh,
at the
nice.
time gold stars were a couple $100, and I don't have those cards anymore. I wish I did. So like I remember just being young and I didn't even know what a gold star was. So I was doing this thing, and like looking back on it, it's just so funny. I went to this place, like I live in a more rural part of Maryland, so I'm in like, the country basically, and we pull up to this house, and I go and I say, hey, do you have any video games? And I'm like, Pokemon card, or like Pokemon cards, Nintendo, anything like that. And like, oh, I think we do. And I go into their house, they bring down this box and a few video games, and I kind of go through it, don't even look at it closely because my focus was actually on the video games. I just knew the video games like had value to them. And I was like, how much do you want for it? And they said 30. And I was like, sure. Like that seemed good enough to me. Usually I would try and negotiate, but with this, I just figured 30 was fine. And I get in the car and I'm like thumbing through the cards, and I was like, this card looks fake. Like the Trico is just a little bit slightly
Oh, it
more
was Team Rocket
pop.
Returns.
Yeah, the Trico is like slightly more popped out than the frame. And I was looking at this card and I was like, all right, it's hollow. This just looks fake. And then I see like the star in the top. So I was like, I've never even seen this before. So I look up like on TCG Player, literally Trico star and gold star Trico. I was like, there is no way this card is $130 at the time. And it was in great condition. And some of the players that I had met similarly, like they had heard about this Trico story. So they wanted to come along and see if this is real. And it's me and two other friends. We go to some garage sales, like second garage sale in, we go to this house in this community, and same thing. Hey, do you have any Pokemon cards? Whatever. And they're like, oh, I think my son has some Pokemon cards. Like, we'll bring him out. We've been wanting him to get rid of them forever, anyways. And we're turning the binder pages of this like XY Kalos 3-ring binder, and we're not seeing a whole lot. Like, we're seeing some competitive cards, which is cool. And like maybe the best card we saw was the Radiant Collection Mew EX. And all of a sudden, we're like turning a page. My friend is turning the page, and I'm like, wait, stop. And I just put my hand on the page, and in the middle of the page is just a Vaporeon Gold Star. And like,
From Power Keepers, yeah.
and they both just start freaking out. And I was like, stop, like, relax, like, do not show excitement. And we're just kind of flipping through it. And it's like, I go to the person, I'm like, okay, how much would you like for this binder? Like $20. I'm like, sure, here you go. We get in the car and we just freak out because we were so excited about it. So I've had a few things like that. I mean, I think like Rocket's admin from, I don't know the set, but way long ago.
Yeah.
For a
Team Rocket.
long time, it was worth a decent amount of money. And when you buy some of these older collections and you stumble across some of these $20, $10 uncommons, and I'm really into building like the retro decks too, whether that's 2016, 2017, or later. So I have a decent understanding of what cards from that era are good too. But those are more examples where it's like I love paying 3 cents and turning into 20.
Yeah. No, that's
$20.
awesome story. And it's those, I mean, I guess those find still exist. I feel they just are few and far between now, because everybody's kind of going after those. And that's a question that's on everybody's, mind. Do you have any Pokemon cards? But no, that's awesome that you were able to take advantage of that before anybody knew. And I kind of feel bad for those kids out there when they're like, everybody has that story, or maybe not everybody, but a lot of people have that story where it's like, my parents sold my Pokemon cards at a yard sale, and I wish I had those because I had a Treco Gold Star from Team Rocket Returns in it. So,
Yeah, I actually have that story. I have that story for myself.
oh
Before
no,
I moved to Maryland, I think I mentioned I was super into Pokemon cards, so I had like tons of level X's, tons of primes, all that stuff, and like playground days, they probably weren't in the best of condition, so I might be reminiscing over nothing.
yeah,
But I remember like that entrepreneurial flame when I was young was like, I'm gonna sell these and get good money. I was on the like mystery lots really early, so I set up my little stand and like, you know, put some little price tags on these Ziploc bagged like Pokemon card lots. And this one guy just came and was like, "Oh, Pokemon lots, that's cool. How about like 50 cents for all of them?" And I just didn't know how to say no. So I was like, "Sure." And to this day, I wish I didn't do that.
yeah. Oh, that's painful. And especially that those are your childhood cards and stuff like that. And that's the thing. It's like you can put a price on a lot of stuff in this hobby, but sometimes the things you just can't price are your one childhood binder, your one childhood collection. Yeah. But that's crazy.
Absolutely.
Uh
I'd love to flip the script on you. Tell me how about you got into the game and all, or the hobby and all that stuff too.
Yeah, so my story starts in 99. I was in, fourth, fifth grade, and I just got into the original base set Jungle Fossil. And then I got out. I don't remember any base set two. And then I must have got out in Team Rocket, just regular Team Rocket, because when I went through my childhood collection, I had like 11 cards or 10 cards. So I must have opened one pack of Team Rocket, and I don't even remember it. Fast forward, I went to college for geoscience. After school, I got a job working in the oil fields as a petroleum engineer, and I was living at a man camp in North Dakota. And at the time, it was 2012. I was super bored because we were working like 30 days on, 15 days off. And on my 15 days off, I would just go on eBay and I was buying a lot of stuff like currencies, movie posters. And one of the things I never had as a kid was a base set Raichu. It was
Mm,
my chase card as a kid. I was super lucky. I pulled the Charizard, pulled the Blastoise, I pulled the Venusaur, but my chase was the Raichu because that was my favorite Pokemon. Never pulled it. Went on eBay, started just buying a ton of Raichus. I don't even know at the time if I wish they had charts that went back. There was probably like a spike in the price of Raichus because I just was buying everyone on eBay. Just didn't matter. And at the time, like eBay auctions were so slow, like the internet connection was so slow that you would try the snipe auctions, but you had to snipe them at like 6 seconds. So you would hit bid because it would take your internet like literally close to 6 seconds to get that bid in. It's not like today on your smartphone where half a
right.
second you hit bid and you get it. But yeah, and then it just that snowballed into just buying collections. And then I remember I had this like long room and I had my movie posters and I had like just a shoebox full of cards because I didn't go to North Dakota with my childhood collection. That was still back home at my parents'.
Mhm.
So I just started, it was like it started into a shoebox and then it was a bigger box and a bigger box and bigger box until eventually like it got to where it is today. But it took a long time to get there. And one of the things I always say about this hobby, which is a pretty amazing thing, is all the people that are just getting into the hobby now and stuff, the amount of information that people in the hobby today have and the amount of information they take for granted took, I don't even know how long. Like when I say I got back in 2012, I wasn't going and buying first edition booster boxes. I wasn't buying first edition cards. I wasn't buying sealed product. I was buying my favorite card that I never had as a kid and then binders. And when I would get a binder, just like you would see that Vaporeon Gold Star, that Treco Gold Star, and you would say, what is this card? I remember looking up Neo Genesis cards and seeing like not even Lugias all the time, just seeing like these random hollows or like Neo Discovery and saying, oh, this is an interesting card. I've never seen any of these cards before. Oh, Houndoom, I don't even know what Pokemon this is, but this is a cool artwork. And then just doing that. But we're talking a time period of months to years where now some of the people that are hopping into this hobby, some of the collection buys that are doing, the knowledge they're talking, I'm just like, never in a million years could I have imagined like being where some of the people are today. Like there's some people in the chat. I just saw a comment. Brew City TCG said, PK, thank you for encouraging me the grade. 10K sales in the last 90 days. Huge for me.
Yeah.
It probably took me 6 years to get 10K in sales, like I couldn't even imagine that. Now I guess, times change and stuff, but these guys are doing crazy things, which when I always say I'm super bullish on this hobby, and I love to get your feelings on this, but like I'm super bullish for the history of this, or like the continuation of this hobby, just because of people like that, like the people, and I talk about it as going deep down the rabbit hole, but
Mhm.
some of these people have freaking did a nosedive off the high dive. So, but I would love to get your thoughts on like future of the hobby and engagement and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting how you mentioned just like the information is different, and I 100% agree. Like I think my age when I was younger, although I was ahead of the curve in many ways, I just wasn't smart when it came to these things. So like to me, it was the quick buck was like better than holding stuff. So to like look back and think I ever would have thought, oh, if I just like held all the stuff I had, it would have worked out. Like I had no idea. Similarly, like to you, how you were saying, like you didn't know everything there was about the hobby. And even when I got in, like people like Mason that started posting videos, or Danny Phantom, who I knew from when I was playing competitively, not very well, but I knew him, and like I think from his Facebook profile, he like showed over his YouTube channel. I was like, whoa, like this guy is,
I've had Danny on the channel before. Danny's a good guy, man.
yeah, like Danny was to me was like the first person teaching like how you could actually run a business like through and through. He was talking about bulk, same stuff, and the knowledge was different even for me. And yeah, I 100% agree with you on that point. It's very cool how much information's out there. And even this weekend, when I was talking to some of my friends that have been playing the card game forever, nowadays there's sites like Limitless TCG where you can go on there and you can see the deck results and statistics for like the meta share and what decks are good, what top players are playing, the full 60 card list. Where some of my friends that have been playing since like '06, back then people just showed up to tournaments. Like they just used their intuition and just figured it out. And the knowledge and how it affects the game is so different. So I resonate with that in both categories of my time in the community. As far as how I think about the community and where I think it's going in the future, I'm super bullish. I mean, I love Pokemon, so I have that innate bias in me where I will probably look at something that seems negative and kind of shoo it away. I think one of the big things that is a red flag to me is how they treat the competitive card game. And of course, I'm like from that area, so I
Sure.
feel passionately about that. But really, the competitive side of the card game is like almost one of the smallest sides, so it's almost a mute point. And we can go into that a little bit, but just how much the game has grown. Some of the cards that they're printing, like there's cooler Pokemon cards now than ever, and I hope that's okay to say. But like some of these trainer gallery cards are so cool looking. Like if you're it's a good example, Comfy. If you're a Comfy fan, who would have guessed you would have gotten a full art Comfy like
Yeah.
nowadays? Like now there's a chase card of like a card that would be stuck in a rare or hollow for life. So I super bullish on where the hobby's going. There's more content creators than ever talking about Pokemon and getting people into it. People that were younger and had Pokemon cards back in the 90s are becoming the age where parents or parenting is coming into the cards. Like they're probably going to pass it on to their kids.
Oh, trust
Um,
me, I'm there, man. I got a kid. I'm forcing it down him whether he wants it or not. He doesn't
yeah,
have a choice. I make the same joke all the time. I say, how some parents are like they push their kids to play sports and the kids end up resenting the parents because they weren't good at sports and they didn't want to do sports. I want to be that dad, but with Pokemon. Like
yeah,
my son has no option but to like Pokemon. And then I got another one on the way. And one of the things I've been doing is buying. 2 booster boxes of every modern set at a minimum. And one of those booster boxes is for my personal collection. So he's 21 months right now. And then I have a second one on the way. So then I'll end up buying 3.
Yeah.
And each one of them. So luckily, my firstborn, he like the first set that came out after he was born was Evolving Skies. So his booster box collection has already increased like drastically in
Right.
value, just that one booster box alone. But I'm not doing specialty sets or anything. I'm not doing every product. I'm just doing the booster boxes. But no, but what you're keep going with what you're saying about like that next generation. But yeah.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, I actually love hearing that. Just because like so many of my friends, close friends, are players of the game. Like, they say similar things where it's like, oh, if I had only just held, or sorry, not exactly what you're saying, but if I had only just held, like, I'd be set right now. So
Yeah.
I'm gonna buy a box for every one of my kids or anything like that. And congratulations too on the second one on the way.
Oh, thank you.
I am curious to hear like how having kids has changed your perspective, like on life as a whole, but also your approach to the hobby.
So I've said this on my channel before, and I'll continue to say it. Everybody's most valuable asset they have, it's not money. Your most valuable asset you have is time. And when you have kids, you find out you have even less time. And that's one of the things that has really hurt the hobby for me personally is time. And especially like I do have a channel, so I do have to be relatively up to date on like current sets. Scarlet and Violet and stuff like that. I had to like recently look at set lists, what cards are even in this set, because I'm having trouble keeping up with the super modern grind, that day to day, that content creation thing, like where you need to be up to date. And I'm like, oh my God, I've ran out of time. And like one of the things I always thank people, and the same with you, is just the fact that you donate to me your time, which is your most valuable asset. Like that's like the biggest thing for me. And I think people don't really understand like the amount of time that goes into this hobby. And I'm very lucky. I consume a ton of content, but I consume a ton of content because at work I have the ability, like most people will listen to Pandora or Spotify and they just have their earbuds in. I'm able to consume content that way. So I'm listening, but I can't view. So like there's people out there who I love their content, like Pokemon Classics, and the only problem is I have to watch his video. I can't just listen to his video. The people that I could just put my buds in and type on my computer or send out reports or whatever, like that's the content I like to consume because I could kind of in a way multitask because of how valuable my time has been. And at the end of the day, I do all these lives at like 9 p.m. Eastern because I feed my kid and then I bathe him and then I change him and I put him in his pajamas and I put him to bed. So I put him to bed at 8 o'clock. So they're like, this is Pokemon time. I ship out all my eBay things. Like, right. I went on Rattles Live right before this one. Right before I went on Rattles Live, I did all my eBay sales of the day. And yeah, it gets so to answer your question, that was a long-winded answer. But what changes in your life is how much time you have in. And you were just talking about how time for you've been starting some new career paths and stuff like that. Time's been an issue, right?
Yeah, big time.
So,
No, so it's kind of interesting we ended up here, because what I asked you is probably one of my favorite questions to ask people that just have kids. I started asking it because last year my uncle, who like he runs a business, so time's always been small for him, and I haven't done a very good job at staying connected to relatives all the time. So when I actually got to talk to him, and I felt like I had matured a lot since the last time I talked to him, he was talking about his newborn, and I was like, how has this changed your life? And then some of the coworkers that I worked for, one time we had like an offsite gathering, and same, one of them had mentioned how they just had kids, and I said the same thing. And to me, it's so interesting. I hadn't heard the time part before, more so the focus shifts to the kids, but that's very similar with time, right? Like the newborn becomes your center of focus,
oh yeah,
and the time comes with that. So there's a common theme between all the answers, but it's almost like a beautiful question because it's the future, and not trying to tie it to Pokemon, but like all those things are related, where eventually the kids of the future generations are going to be the future of the world? And no, it's a beautiful question, and really happy that we were able to touch on it.
Yeah, man. I don't know if you're familiar with old school Pokemon, but he's in the chat and he says, "You have less time with kids?" Question mark. That settles it. I can't ever have kids. Yeah.
No, yeah, Nick is another channel that I have watched a lot of, because Nick was another one of those Pokemon bulk dealers, and I was like, man, this guy is gone for 6 months again because he's on his ship for work. When is he going to come back? And I remember seeing his channel come back. I was like, yes, like finally, more Pokemon bulk content is coming back. So it's like so cool seeing some of the channels that I've like watched for a long time.
You're deep down the rabbit hole when you get excited when the bulk channel comes back.
Yeah, yeah.
No, that's awesome, man. But so what are your plans now? I don't know if I mentioned this or if I mentioned it before we went live. I know on your website you're kind of like you don't have anything listed right now because you just said you're busy with other stuff and it's hard to focus on Pokemon and you're focusing more on TCG player route and stuff like that. But what are your future plans for the hobby? Where do you see like yourself going? Where do you see your business going? Where do you see like that going?
Oh, it's something I've thought about a decent amount, and you know, so the reason there's not much stuff on the website is I've done a decent amount of like direct to consumer business through Pokemon, and it's cool, but it the amount of like chargeback claims I've gotten from it is like really astounding. And I'm doing all this through Shopify, which Shopify has added protection, like some sort of protection against it. But at the time when I used to do D2C, I would just get hit with chargebacks like every so often. And really, when you're selling booster boxes, if you're selling them at like a 20% profit margin, you get one chargeback for $300 and it just wipes out all the profits of all the stuff. And like when you're not getting allocated huge amounts, like it kind of makes it mute. And on top of less time, I work full time, sometimes 50 hours a week, and then I'm also in school at the same time. My focus just became, I just need to find clients that can just take mass amounts of product, and maybe that my profit margin's smaller. But for me, it's like, okay, distributor contacts me, hey, we have this stuff, and I go, cool, I'll buy whatever I can. You're going to allocate me X amount, and then I'm just going to like ship it somewhere else. And if I can avoid opening the boxes, opening the distributor packaging myself and just get it off somewhere else, that would be ideal. And for me, it became less about maximizing the dollar and more so just get it in, get it out. So I've done a lot more B2B transactions where there's less fraud occurring and it's way easier, because if I had to package a bunch of booster boxes, it would take a ton of time. And I'm hoping that once I'm out of school, I can kind of dedicate more focus to the hobby. One of the reasons I've strictly stuck to uploading once a week is just time. I would love to do more than once, talk about other things, but being in school and being in work, like I kind of just take Saturdays to grind everything out and record and get everything done. And once I started editing the videos, that became even longer. To which I've had someone help me out with that recently, but time is a big component of my hobby. As far as the future, I really, really started to enjoy the content creation side of stuff. I got pretty deep into the rabbit hole of like the creator economy, which I don't know if that's the right term for it, but some of the really bigger creators, Mr. Beast or like Colin and Samir, channels like that really look at the business of being a creator. And I think it's really fascinating. There are people that can turn entire careers out of just like talking to a camera. And I find that really fascinating as like an alternative route to working a 9 to 5 or something. And so continuing to create content where like there's like a lack of time to me was like, how can I continue to teach some of the stuff that I've learned over the years and also treat it as a business and interact with the community? So maybe I'm not spending 100 hours a week selling cards anymore, but I'm talking about it, teaching people how to do it, leaving my Discord DMs open to where people want to ask me whatever they want. I'm more than happy to respond via email or Discord to anything like that. So the future, for a lot of things in my life, like not even community, the Pokemon community itself, I'm kind of just waiting to get done with school because it's going to open up like my after hours working time.
Yeah. And for anybody out there who's watching this video now or after the fact on replay, down in the description below is a link to the TCG Labs YouTube page. And then I got the #1 mod in the game, Drew. I know Drew will drop a link to your YouTube right now. And anybody, the 88 people that are watching this live right now, just real quick, click on that link, give them a subscribe, and then you could just hop right back here. We're not going anywhere anytime soon. So
Thank you, PK. And for anyone that
yeah.
just decides to subscribe, welcome.
Yeah,
I hope
no,
you
you
enjoy.
gotta, like I said, you have an awesome channel. You have one that I've been watching. That was one of the reasons why I wanted to bring you on, is just because you're bringing a different perspective to the hobby, and there, that is a gap right now in the hobby, is that, grinding route and everything, and the TCG player direct route. And I always say this about this hobby is anybody can be a. I think that there's like two different arguments to have. Like, one, you can be super in your niches and you can just be super focused on one thing and you cannot really know anything else. Or you can still be like super focused at one thing, but then do your best to become that jack of all trades at all things Pokemon, right?
Mhm.
And one of the things that is all things Pokemon is watching channels like yours and starting to find out that there are other avenues to go, other roads, because you, and I think this is something I'm still personally striving to do, and I hope a lot of people out there are striving to do this, is to just become more well-rounded in this hobby. And channels like yours are really helping a lot of people do that. But next question I want to ask you, because a lot of people in the chat have been talking. I've seen PSA pop up in the chat like 30 times. Are you going the grading route for anything? Or are you strictly a singles raw type person?
Yeah, so I would call them failed experiments is what my experience with grading cards has been. Um, from when I was a player, I've submitted to PSA once and I've submitted to CGC twice. So to answer the question at broad, no, I don't do a whole lot of grading. And maybe my experience was like really poor because of the timing that I submitted. So actually a month or two ago, I got my PSA submission back and waited 2 years. So February
Wow.
21 to February 23 is how long I waited for the cards that I sent to PSA. CGC, I think the turnaround was, I want to say 6 to 7 months. I'm not 100% sure. But unfortunately, I really got into the mindset of like, oh, this is a baby shiny Pokemon. I should buy a bunch of these and try and quick flip them or
So are
whatever.
we talking hidden fates? Are we talking later? Talking shining fates, hidden fates?
Oh, both. I mean,
Both.
like,
Oh
yeah.
boy.
So yeah, it failed experiment is a good way to put it. And actually, within the first 5 videos on my channel, I think both of the CGC submissions are on there. Where I think my first video ever is me going through the cards I'm sending to CGC. Really bad video quality and all that stuff. So if you're curious, you can go watch it. But it's just ultra rares from Hidden Fates, shinies, like rainbow rares, just any card that I perceived as could be valuable in the future, which at the time was just like select all anything. So not really accurate or not very good. And then I think a couple videos later is like me getting those cards back and just being like, yeah, market's changed. Uh, this card was $20, but now the case is worth more than the card. I also learned I'm not very good at grading
No,
cards.
you're
Like,
you're probably better than you think. It's just you probably got hit with CGC 8 5s and 9s. You weren't.
yeah, 8 5s and 9s are pretty accurate. A few sevens, I think like 7 or maybe 6 5 would have been the worst, but mainly 8s and 9s, or 9 5s. But yeah, I mean, I think that experience kind of just soured it for me. I was just like, no, I don't really care for this. Like I looked at it as a business opportunity. And then the PSA submission, to me, I didn't really care about the 2 years part. I just cared I got him back. And as a player, um, I've competed in Worlds several times, so I've gotten a lot of the Champions Festival cards. And in 2017, I actually placed at the World Championships. I think I got 16th. And the way they do it is they give you every
Everything
placement.
behind.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
give you one of everything behind, and then 2 of the placement you actually got. So I have 2 top 16 festivals and 1 32 festival, and then
And
like
you
the
still
entry.
have those?
Yeah, and the entry festival. And I think in some deal somewhere, I got like a 2013 Top 16 Champions Festival. And like these are cards where like I never want to sell them. They would
Yeah.
be, I'm buying a house or something like that to where maybe it becomes a like something I would think about, but I don't want to ever be in a position to have to sell those. So with PSA, those were a part of those 2-year submissions, and I wasn't so much worried about when I got them, just I need to get them. And
Yeah.
like I think a year into it, I forgot about it and almost like panicked when I saw all the PSA drama that was going down. I was like, no, like there's no way I'm losing these cards because of something that was going on. And luckily, I realized that had almost nothing to do with the U.S. But yeah, so that was my grading experience. There's
So can I
cards.
ask you,
Yeah.
how did how did your top 16, and I'm guessing you got the top 32 and stuff. How did those grade? What did you end up getting?
Yeah, so the top three top the three 2017 Champions Festivals got 9s, the 16-13 one got an 8.
Okay.
And I attribute the 9 to when you are handed like they hand you this bag for getting top 32. It's like a nice leather like sash bag that has like Pikachu on it and all this stuff. The festivals are actually in like one of those plastic cases that you would see a card store have, and the festivals have like no sleeve on them or anything. So
Yeah.
I think I probably waited too long to like actually put the cards in the sleeve, and then like walking back to the hotel, I have the bag on me. They're probably like shaking around. So I mean, I think I was like 16 at the time. So I wish that I like my first thought was these are not in sleeves. I need to sleeve these. But unfortunately, I think I can attribute the 9 to like the cards just moving around in a case with no sleeve on, which probably makes a bunch of people cringe.
Well, what about so you're saying a lot of your buddies, a lot of those people that I guess you would call part of the lab, are they sitting on a bunch of those high-end trophy cards too, or have you had some of your friends sold them off into the market? Because I will I will not lie. I was never a player. I never placed top 16, anything like that. Nothing like anything close to what you did.
Mhm.
But I would find it very hard to see the prices of a lot of these trophy cards and not try to take advantage of that market. So do you have other friends that have sold into the market?
Yeah. I think most of my closest friends, I mean, this is going to sound crazy, but I think most of my friends never cared enough.
Well,
Like
that's good.
they still have them to this day. One of my friends who I talk to every once in a while, but we've had this discussion several times. He was the first, like he won Worlds as a senior a couple years back, and like every once in a while he'll hit me up and be like, "Hey, how much do you think my champion Pikachu's worth?" I'll be like, "Oh, like a lot."
A lot.
Like you probably like I don't know. It depends on your buyer, whatever. I think one time we almost brokered a deal where someone was going to come to LA and like we were going to fly out there and like broker the whole deal, but that ended up falling through. And like it was so funny because and looking back, I maybe it was someone in the community that's relevant today, but I think there was, as a player, there was always this reputation that when you win Worlds, someone's going to pull up and just give you 5K cash for the card. And I feel like from watching enough SM Pratt videos that it's Scott or someone.
Well, there is
Try,
one Dave Persons out there.
yeah,
So
that guy too.
one Dave Persons will pay one person a lot of money, and then everyone else could get the scraps because he's going to pay the most. But yeah,
Yeah, and I never got the privilege of being the world champion, so I never experienced that myself. But I do remember watching Dave Person's videos and like hearing him talk about this. And so this one friend was offered the 5K, did not take it, and then he always told me he regretted not taking it. That like the card was just a card to him,
yeah,
and I'm thinking he's crazy, not because of the monetary value of the card, but just like
that's
you only win worlds once. But
yeah, that's
now we've
interesting.
seen the ballooning of the card, and on Andre Skubal, I think sold the 2022 world champion, and I want to say it fetched a pretty penny.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of my friends have kept them, but I do know a lot of players across the board that sell their stuff as soon as they get it.
Yeah, one of my friends, I'm sure you probably know who he is, Dan Catchmall Collectibles, but
Yep.
he bought his number one Pika, and then I think he ended up selling it for over 90K. So you're talking big dollar amounts, and that's
Yeah.
a lot. He sold it for way more than he paid. But real quick, local Los Collection says, I appreciate the super chat. He said, not to sound dark, two things can't be stopped: time and death. I'm gonna add a third thing to that. You got time, death, and taxes. Those are the three things that make me sad. And if you're in the Pokemon community, everyone knows taxes is a thing. But hey man, I want to. If you're good, I would like to keep this chat going for like 20 more minutes. I'm really enjoying this chat, but I just have to go pee real quick, so I'm gonna run
Yeah,
upstairs. But if you
yeah,
feel comfortable, just you could talk to the chat for a minute. I'll be right back.
sure thing. Sounds good. How's it going, chat? If you guys don't know me, I'm Will. Good to meet some of you all. I haven't looked at the chat too much. I've been trying to focus in on the conversation, but if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them. I see Benny's in the chat. Good to see you, Benny. Yeah, Andre Scuball won London 2022 with Arceus V-Star, Pikachu V-Max, Decidueye V-Star. Hey, comment in the chat too. Nice. How's it going, Drew? Yeah, Mason, you're absolutely correct. The PSA pops don't stop. I don't know too much about PSA pops, but I tried understanding them a little bit. Hey, Tony. Also, I have to get it in while I'm here. When we were talking about like older school cards, and he was talking about Raichu, I have a friend named Brett who has been chasing First Ed Raichu for so long. So shout out to Brett for the Raichu.
Wait, hold on. I just came back and all I heard was Raichu. What happened?
So I was going to mention this earlier, but I have a friend that I've known for a long time from playing Pokemon, and every once in a while we'll like hop in Discord calls, and he'll be like, "Dude, I need to get this First Ed Raichu," and his goal is to get first edition Shining Raichu in like a
Oh,
decent PSA grade. It doesn't have to
okay.
be 8 or 9 or whatever, but for him it's similar to you where it's like the sentimental value of the Raichu card. It's not a Charizard
Yeah.
or anything. And hasn't done it yet, but every once in a while we'll hop in Discord and kind of look at eBay listings and just like mess around. But yeah, his favorite card is Raichu as well.
Yeah, I got a couple of those. I'm probably one of the reasons he's not getting some of them. But no, I haven't been buying the 10s. I think so. You mentioned James from Z&G Emporium. I think James posted his 10. I think his was unlimited though. I don't think his was. Wait, I just watched. I didn't buy it. I forget. I doubt James might be in the chat lurking. James Z&G, if you're in the chat, let me know if your PSA 10 Shining Raichu was first edition or unlimited. But it went for what I considered a good price. And then when we were down in Denver, Jake from Pokenomics had his Shining Raichu in his case, and I looked at it, but I mean, he had it priced at a fair market value.
Yeah, I think that's the similar situation for my friend Brett. Is like we're looking at eBay, just hoping maybe there will be one that's not market value, and we'll get the snipe off. But in today's day and age, I don't know if that even exists anymore.
Yeah, no, some stuff still floats under the radar, but the high end stuff, the stuff that's in the tens, it doesn't slip. Shining cards don't slip through the radar anymore. Like you can listen, there's always that one auction where somebody just titles it Pokemon cards, and then on page 8 of their listing is like some Shining Raichu, like in a binder page. You don't have back photos and you just take a chance, but those are few and far between. It's not like it used to be.
Yeah. So I'm curious, PK. You mentioned how you're into like coins and movie posters, stuff like that. And
I
I think
was. Yeah.
oh, you were. I think similarly how like you want your kids to take on Pokemon. My dad was similar, where he was super into movie posters like Star Wars
Okay.
action figures, stuff like that.
Oh,
And it
that's
worked out
awesome.
well. Of course, I'm like a bit of a nerd myself, but I'm curious what kind of at the time got you into the like broader collectible space as a whole.
So the funny thing is I was familiar with grading for a long time because of coin, or not coin grading, but currency grading. Like, so my mom, so we had like two family businesses growing up, but one of those family businesses was a laundromat. And
Mhm.
my mom, it was like my grandparents started the business. My mom worked there. My mom ended up owning her own laundromat. But one of the things was they stopped making silver quarters in 1964. And if you are familiar with the sound of like silver quarters, they sound different. And either you know or you don't. But like, so what my mom would be doing was she'd just, at the end of the day, clean out all the washing machines, have all the coins, and she would just count the quarters, do stacks, $10, bring them to the bank. And then once in a while she would be flipping through and you would just hear the sound of that coin dink, and it just made this very distinct silver sound, and you could be standing on the other side of the room and you could hear it. Like, so at a very, very, very young age, my mom taught me how to identify like silver coins. And the reason my mom learned that is because when my grandfather started the business, they started it so long ago that they didn't do silver quarters, they had silver dimes, so like mercury dimes and stuff like that. So I I have a lot of mercury dimes. Like, I have way more mercury dimes than like 99.9999% of the world, because like that was all just inherited, like passed down to me. So
Uh-huh.
my grandfather taught my mom like the difference between Roosevelt dimes and mercury dimes. And then my mom taught me the difference of silver quarters. And when they changed the silver quarters, like my grandfather started collecting silver. So that's how it started. And then just bills and stuff. And then I went down that rabbit hole. And then my mom started grading currencies at like, I don't even know, probably the 90s. My mom has like one of the oldest eBay accounts ever. It's like, so I think her eBay account starts in like, you know how you can look at when eBay accounts start? Hers is
Yeah.
like 93 or 94. So it's just kind of like in my genes in a way. So I don't really remember what the question was. Like, how did I get into collecting? It was because of my
Yeah.
mom, though. Like, to put it simply, my mom, the gene that I have was inherited from my mom, like 100%.
Yeah. No, that's incredible. I think my knowledge when it comes to coins is the wheat penny, and this item has, or this like collection has not been passed down to me per se, but it's been passed down to the family. And I think my grandfather, he used to own a sub shop in California, and I think just I don't know, one way or another amassed a large collection of wheat pennies. And so
Yeah.
there's like several thousand wheat pennies somewhere in the family. And then I used to work at McDonald's when I was in high school, and I became a manager at 18, and would have to like go and look at all the coin dispensers. And there was this one other manager who was super into coins, and every time we would like reconcile the drawers at the end of the day, he would like make sure I was looking for certain things, and then he would swap them with like whatever coins he had. And so those are my two coin stories. But what kind of started the transition? Do you still collect any of that stuff today, or is it pretty much strictly Pokemon?
So, I mean, you can't really see it, but like, I do have like some old money in the background,
Mm,
just like, you know, and and they're just kind of sitting in the background, and they're just kind of like kind of remembering like how I got back into it. And the reason why I have these is because when I mentioned that I was buying coins and currency in 2012,
mhm.
I bought both of these during that time period.
Oh,
So both of these are the reason why they're back there is because they represent when I got back into the hobby. And like
yeah.
that's why these are important. So,
That that's incredible. It's a very
yeah.
cool story. Is
Yeah.
there
So
anything
like,
else back there that has a story like that to it?
oh, yeah, every single thing back there is important to me. And like that was one of the things that I did when I built this. So, and I wanted to make it special, right? Like where everything means something special to me. And a lot of that stuff are cards that I got as a kid, favorite movies. Uh that's like my Marvel binder. That regular right there is a
Oh,
regular
nice.
Nintendo controller,
Yeah.
and one of the corners of it's bit. Like it has teeth marks in it, and that was my dog growing up bit that. And like that dog died in like 2010. So like that controller right there that probably doesn't work, that has, teeth marks in it for my dog that's been gone now for 22 years. Somebody could come here and offer me $10,000 for that controller and I'd tell them go kick rocks.
Right.
So there's a lot of just sentimental stuff up there.
Yeah.
Like I have a signed slab. I have like a Nolan Ryan rookie card. That was my favorite baseball player growing up. Uh, just,
No, that's
crazy stuff.
amazing. I
Yeah.
think one of the things I really took away from buying collections of whether it's like Pokemon cards or like video games and a lot of the video game systems that I was looking for, like the ones that would make more money, were like before I was even around. So it was kind of cool to like stumble upon NES, for example, and like, kind of tinker around and get to play it a few times. But I always felt that the collections that I was purchasing, they always had like a story to them, and part of the mystery was like I would never know what said story was. And it became really cool when I started buying collections off players I knew, because I could be like, oh, like here's this regional promo from whatever, and it's like this time period. It's like, oh, I probably met them around this time period. And there's almost like a story to all sorts of different collectibles. And like, as you said, you do eBay, so like there's all sorts of like buying and selling going on and on all the time across the world. And like so many of these cards have like an origination point, which is that printing, and then it just like travels through. But there's so many touch points on the way to like wherever it goes, and like the journey's almost not even done, because the cards I have at some point could just like go to someone else for one reason or another. And I think that's like another very cool thing about collectibles is there's almost this like history to every item that just
Yes.
exists, but no one knows.
Yeah. And yeah, the cool thing about that is the history too, is everybody has their own unique story. And that's why, and it is like that. We talk about it like the collector gene or whatever.
Hmm.
But one of the things that gives the things we own value is because we sometimes irrationally value stuff, and if you didn't have that irrationality in the value of your collection, like inherently, none of this is really rare. None of this is super expensive, but because we equate that value, because we equate that story behind it or that passion behind it, we are the ones that drive this hobby. And yeah, it's just,
Yeah.
that's why
I
we do it, right? Like and that's the thing I talk about Pokemon all the time. And I'd be curious to know your thoughts on this, but I always say, if you don't care about Pokemon and you're not passionate about Pokemon, in my opinion, you will fail at this hobby, or maybe not fail, but you will never like transcend to be on the highest end of this hobby if you
mhm.
don't care about the cards, if you don't care about the characters, if you don't care about everything that is Pokemon. So
Yeah. I think that sentiment translates to life. And I think I've learned this too, even just like in working, right? Like you get a new job and it's all sparkles and glitter, but then you're at the job for a little bit and you start to realize like, maybe this isn't what I want to do. And so many people, like, I think the mantra that you're supposed to be taught early is like, it's not always about the money. Like if you pick something that you will enjoy and you can do it for as long, like if you could just always do it, you'll never have to worry about disliking the job or anything like that, and like the money part will come.
yeah, if you
And
love your job, you never work a day in your life.
right,
Yeah.
right. And I think that's another reason why bulk to me, even though it takes so much freaking time, it was almost like fun. Like I was content with spending my entire weekend going through cards and seeing the story of the card, flipping through the bulk and seeing like, oh, here's this field blower that was really good in Drampa Garb in 2017 because Garbodor was really good, or because Volcanion needed an answer to Drampa Garbodor. Like, oh, here's this Guzma. I remember when Guzma came out in Burning Shadows and it changed the meta and how decks were played. Like, there's almost like a fun of going through some of these commons and uncommons. And even though it was like backbreaking work to try and get those lots together, and of course there was financial drive behind it, but I think the reason I still am okay with like listing cards and doing this stuff instead of going out for social activities, for example, is just the passion of being in the space, and Pokemon's been with me for such a long time.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably something that you're right. If you don't have the passion for Pokemon and it's purely financially driven all the time, probably like you'll probably burn out really quickly.
Yeah. No, and you're right. And yeah, I heard somebody say something pretty crazy the other day, like pretty much in a way said it about me. Like, I think I forgot how they phrased it, but they said like, is PK even a collector? And like, I heard that and I kind of like just roll my eyes in a way. I'm just like, listen, I talk about the money a lot and I talk about the finances of Pokemon because like that's what I enjoy. But
Mhm.
for anybody to say like I'm not a collector, is just like for me preposterous, like it's just. But the problem is I think it's easy for people to just like see you talk about money all the time and everything, but if anybody doesn't see like that I have passion for this hobby, it's just ridiculous. But like I saw it in you right away. Like that was one of the reasons I brought you on, because one of the things I've been trying to do more than anything else is surround myself with just like-minded people, people that are just passionate about this hobby. And what you're doing on your channel, your background in this hobby, just like it just like that's the vibe you give off. And I think that's just so important. And we had Nick Old School Pokemon in the chat, and he grinds singles, he grinds bulk. And the reason he grinds that stuff is because he truly loves it, It takes a special type of person, but you can tell those person right away.
Yeah. And I want to touch on what you were saying. Like, I think, well, I mean, like society kind of changed in 2020, 2021 about this, but it's also okay to be passionate about money. And you can have both things at the same time. And like, I work in finance. I love studying personal finance and all this stuff. And to me, if I wanted to create content, creating a pack opening channel is not for me. I don't I don't get the like I don't get the enjoyment out of opening packs. It's not something I could do all the time. And that's not to say pack opening channels are bad, but like for me, creating a YouTube channel around business and making money out of the thing I'm passionate about is like two worlds colliding at once. Like it's so cool that you can make money and have it be the thing that you're passionate about. And like this kind of with the creator economy thing, like there's creators that are doing this, whether it's they're doing skits or they're doing comedy or they're doing music. Like you can make money out of doing things you're passionate about. And with Pokemon cards, like players are incentivized to play at tournaments because there's money attached to the tournaments. And they love the game, but they also love winning tournaments and winning
Sure.
money. So
Yeah.
like
And that
it's
shouldn't be frowned upon. It's just part of.
100%. And I
Yeah.
think, I think 2020, 2021, 2022 maybe blew some of that out of proportion to where, I don't know, let's, for lack of a better term, like maybe bad actors came in and made it way too much about the money to where it was like, oh no, we can't talk about money anymore because that's not okay. But I think I think it's okay to like be honest and say like, yeah, money is a part of it and it's okay to want to make money. And if your passion's tied to money and you're transparent and honest about it, like, what's the big deal? You don't have to watch.
Yeah. No. And one of the things I love doing more than anything else is I love looking at like old sets and stuff. Sets that I never got the experience of opening. Like I mentioned to you, when I got out, and I don't even remember opening that Team Rocket pack. Like that's my favorite story because I just saw it in my binder when I got older. And there was a huge period of time before I opened my next Pokemon pack. So it's just one of the things I love to do is study the sets that I wasn't around for and like find out what were the hits. But then one of the things that has now helped me transcend in this hobby a little bit is I've been trying to do my best to surround myself with people that were around for that.
Hmm.
And you talk about the competitive play. One of my favorite people in this entire hobby to talk to is a guy, Joe Echo Base Collectibles. And he was a competitive player up to like 2007. So he was at the WotC Fan Appreciation Tournament in June of 2003. You want to hear what his prize support was? He got top 10, I believe. So in 10th place, do you know what his prize support was? 10 booster boxes of
Yeah,
Sky Reach.
dude, okay, I have a friend who I don't talk to him about this much, but similar story. So I kind of knew where you were going with this. And he played the same time and he sat on that stuff. Like he to this day still has some of these things. And the prize support back then was insane.
Yeah.
Like you get top 16, you get 10 boxes of Sky Ridge Expedition. This sets that like people today would like they just want one. And like if you were a
Yeah.
player back then, passionate about the game, you got 10. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. But he's one of my favorite people to talk to is because when I love asking him questions about what was the timeline like because he was a judge during all that time. Like he was super
Mm,
into the TCG. Like I said, he went to Worlds a few times and I don't know what hobby was like from 2000 to 2007. And then, the things he talks about, and he talks about like gold stars and what were people really chasing after, and like just I don't really know how to equate it into words. Like he just brings such a different perspective to the hobby. But the thing is people only ever care sometimes about like what's going to benefit them today. And the
Yeah.
problem is to hear what it was like in 2003 at the Fan Appreciation Tournament, or what did people think about Dragon Frontiers when it came out and it introduced the Gold Star Charizard or the Gold Star Mew. That doesn't translate into today. But if you are just like an overall like studier of this hobby, which I like to think I am, I care about that stuff, even though it might not really translate into today's prices. It still helps me become like just a better, more well-rounded person in this entire hobby. So I love to hear those stories. And if you have any of those stories talking about like some of your friends that were playing back in the day, like I love to hear that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure, I'll give you a good one. And I'm not going to remember the story exactly because I don't know what the card text is. But speaking of how we were talking about like information asymmetry, where like the information just wasn't out there. One of my friends has been playing for a long, long time. I think he got into the game in '07. And this is a story about the game that just is so funny. At the time, deck lists like for these decks they weren't shared. Like people didn't talk about them. You would just show up to the tournament and do whatever. And there was I hope I get this card right, but there was like a Spinnerack or a Spinda, the basic Pokemon of this spider Pokemon that said
I
something
know what
along the lines
Spinnerack is,
of
yeah.
like trap your opponent's act in the active, like they can't retreat. And my friend was playing a deck that like his whole idea was to use the Spinnerack. You would have to have the grass energy to go with it to trap the opponent's Pokemon in the active. Well, my friend, I don't know if he did this intentionally or not, but he just played the Spinnerack, but he didn't play the grass energy. And it was just in this deck where like, the whole strategy of the deck has nothing to do with the Spinnerack. But at the time, nobody played cards that could get around a Spinnerack trapping something in the active. And he was playing in a finals match, and his opponent was so scared of the Spinnerack that he played around it the entire time. And my friend didn't play grass energy, so you can't even like the Spinnerack is completely useless. And
Yeah.
because his opponent was playing around the Spinnerack, he had to play in a way that was a disadvantage to my friend's just deck period, and ended up just like steamrolling him in this finals tournament, and ended up winning the event. But it was just like you would like how would you know that some common from whatever set
That's
caused this
what an
person to lose the
interesting play
tournament?
though, too, to just have it. So I'm guessing what he put it on his bench, or the person knew that it was in his deck.
Yeah, so like word spreads like wildfire throughout the tournaments, especially if they're smaller, and especially in a time when there's no information out there. So like, someone probably heard, oh, he's plays Spinnerack. And similarly, this ended up becoming a problem in the game. I think they've banned this or whatnot. But I think the story was there was a player from Japan that came to the US, and it's Dusknor from one of the Diamond and Pearl sets, and it essentially like it limits the amount of bench Pokemon in play because every turn you can elect to like put two of them back into your opponent's deck, or maybe it's one or something. So it's like a bench control card.
Okay.
And this person played a deck that didn't actually play Dusknor in it, but he just put the copy of like just a Dusknor on the table or something as like a translation, because if you're from Japan, you play with the Japanese cards,
Yep,
and
yep.
you don't necessarily have the US
Well, you
versions.
used to be able to do that. You can't do that anymore. Yeah.
Right. And one of the reasons is this Dusknor, because essentially he was like saying, oh, there's this Dusknor that I play, but he doesn't actually play it. So then the opponent plays completely differently because they think at any point Duskull Candy Dusknor can just come into play and change the way that you're setting up. And if you like bench lock yourself into 5 bench Pokemon, you could really mess yourself up if your opponent just gets to like do that and say, okay, I want this Pokemon back in the deck. Now your main attacker is gone. So like all these little weird things about the game that have changed over time, and like stories of judges like you were mentioning that just get tons of prize support, all sorts of stuff. It's really interesting.
Yeah. And no, when I talked to Joe, one of the things he talks about is he had just a ton of like Pop Series packs because he was a judge, he would hand them out, and you would just sometimes not have enough people show up to the tournament that you could only hand out so many. He said they came in like a giant Ziploc bag, 25 of the Pop Series packs would come. And he was in for Pop Series 1, 2, 3, 4, and he stopped judging when 5 came out. And then obviously 5 has the Espeon and the Umbreon
Yeah.
Gold Stars in it. So it's like it was just one of those, you don't know what's going to happen. But the funny thing is he had both of those cards in his deck. And looking at some of his master collections he had, and he was a true player. So the way he would build all his binders was he would have in each pocket of, he would do master sets, but he would build them with 4 cards because he would do them as play sets.
Right.
So all his binders had 4 of each card in it. And yeah, it's cool to hear stuff like that. And it's funny, when I asked him about Pop Series 5, he still had both those cards. He ended up great, and it's a crazy story about how they damage his Espeon and stuff. But like at PSA, and then ended up getting a payout for it. But either way, he's like, yeah, at the time nobody really cared about these, at least not like the way we care about these now, because we care about Umbreon and Espeon Gold Stars from Pop Series 5 because they were non-holos. You couldn't weigh the packs, so every pack's a lotto and stuff like that. And then the number the community has fell on as a whole is 1 per 40 packs. Listen, I have no clue if that number is correct or not. I haven't opened 40 Pop Series 5 packs to say that's true or not. I had Scott Pratt on my channel one time, went during like a mega live I had. Scott said he opened exactly 40 packs of Pop Series 5 and never pulled one of the gold stars. So I don't know where that number came from, but that's a number we quote. So
Sure.
it's just,
Yeah.
but it's cool to hear all the stories, and to see the way his binders were built. It's just fascinating.
No, you're absolutely right. It's so weird how sentiment has changed, because similarly, like one of my closer friends in the hobby, he and his brother's the world champion. So like the pair of, and actually it's like 3. It's a family of 3. They've been in the game since like 07. Some of them don't play anymore. Some of them do.
What year did he
And
win?
my friend,
Yeah.
17.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But like the family's been in for a long time. And one time I got to go to their house, and for me, one of my favorite things, and like this dates back to when I was really into like Bionicles when I was younger, is like if I knew someone that had a collection bigger than mine, or like an unkept mess of the collectibles or something, all I would want to do is just like spend hours just going through it, like looking at pieces or like looking at different things, and just kind of like, I don't know, just going through it and organizing it or whatever. And I once got the opportunity to do this, and I was just appalled at how much stuff there was. And kind of what you were saying, like, gold stars at the time maybe weren't as special as they are now. And so you're coming across tons of gold stars, but they're like damaged, or there's like 4 of them and they're all just in a binder sleeve, like stuff like that. And it's like so cool in a modern time period to even look at this stuff and kind of be like, dude, these things are like worth money. Why are they still just sitting here? Like, what are you doing? And it was so cool going through like an unkept collection that felt like Pokemon in history, because there were cards from the 90s all the way up to like the most recent Sword and Shield set. And it just kind of felt like walking through time, where some of it was sorted, some of it was not sorted. There were binders for some things, not binders for some things. There's like international deck boxes that we don't have in the US that I've never seen before, or there were like play promos that I had never seen before. Like I didn't even know till recently that Claydol, I don't know what set it's from, but the Claydol that allows you to draw cards has a play promo. I didn't know that. There's like play promos of all sorts of cards that I didn't know had play promos to them. And it was just like going through this collection and seeing so many different things felt like that eye-opening moment of like, wow, there's so much that I don't even know about, that I want to like know about.
Yeah. It's not really so much about like knowing, but like I mentioned, I love the history of this hobby, right? And sourcing cards back in the day. And one of the people that I've had on, and it's personally like one of my, I think I know what my favorite live I ever had is. So I have 2 of my favorite lives. Probably my favorite live is that mega stream I had where I had like a bunch of big collectors in the hobby. But then my personal favorite is I had a one-on-one with Rusty TCA Gaming. Like,
Mm.
I took PTO from work that day in order to do a 10 a.m. live. It's still like it was like a highlight. It was like a huge milestone for me for my channel. Just like it was a very big personal goal because like I respect the guy a ton. But one of my other favorite lives is I had this guy on and if people are not new to this channel, they know the story. But his name was MK Poke CC, and in 2009 he was washing dishes as a high school job, and he saved up all his money washing dishes, and he bought a number 3 super secret battle Mewtwo, sourced it online. He spent $1,800 on the card. That is a card that is so he ended up grading that card. He was the first person to ever grade it in a PSA 10. That card today sells for greater than 6 figures. We're talking huge $100,000+ card. He sourced Trophy Kangaskhan's. He was one of the very first people to grade a Trophy Kangaskhan in a 10. He had the phone cards from Tropical Mega Battle in 99. Like, the Articuno, Zapdos, Moltres, like the phone cards. And then he had all these cards until eventually he worked his way up and he traded for, and I love the way he tells the story because he says it's in the name of the game, right? Pokemon trading card game. So he traded up to an Illustrator Pikachu, which now today we know what an Illustrator Pikachu is worth, right? Like Logan Paul had his crazy $5 million deal and all this shit. And, Illustrator Pikachu is in a way like the top of the mountain, but he traded in order to get that. And like for me to hear that story, he was the one that I'm sure you've seen it before. He had the authentic Illustrator Pikachu. You might have seen it. It's like the only authentic one, but that was the one he traded for, and he traded for it with a collector in Canada. Just
Is
love
authentic in reference to like the grading label?
the grade label, so it doesn't
Okay.
have like a number grade. It's just authentic grade.
Right.
It's very when you see it, you'll be like, oh, okay, I know the backstory of that. So he traded into that, and then that was like the peak of the hobby for him. But he had he talks about like sourcing snap cards. He was buying snap cards too, and at the time, like the Silver Bible came out, and if anybody doesn't know what the Silver Bible is, it was like a magazine that came out in 2000 in Japan, and it had images of all these cards, and one of the images it had of was all the snap cards. And at the time, nobody knew how many snap cards really came out. There was somebody came out, posted a photo of 15 of them. It was one of the winners. It was for the Poly Whirl. And then at the time, everybody said, okay, there was 15 of these snap cards were handed to each winner, ended up being 20. But anyways, he was able to source one of those Poly Whirl cards, a snap card. Like, and the best part of it is he was in high school. He was in college doing this stuff because at the time there was no market for this.
Right.
Like to spend $1,800 on a Pokemon card was, you were dumb in a way, right? Like you were the only one doing that. And I just love the story he tells. And like he has in the Tropical Mega Battle in 99, they handed out jackets to all the players. Like he still has the jacket that he bought from one of the winners hanging up in his closet at home. Like just Dubsy always shows off like these full art Illustrator Pikachu or choose from Arita, where he's holding the number 1, number 2, number 3 trophies, and it says to Michael. The guy's name is MK Poke CC. The M stands for Michael. So the one that Dubsy always shows off is like they were graded by PSA. It was him who commissioned those to be made by Arita. And then he was the first person to ever have Arita do, the original 1, 2, 3 Pikachu artwork. Like just shit like that, where I absolutely love that story. Does that help me at all in modern Pokemon? No.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, two things there. The one is like I remember being in SM Pratt's like Patreon a while ago and like hearing some of his stories and kind of similar to some of the things that it sounds like Michael was going through, and like kind of that like my thought process at the time was like, whoa, like you have to have such conviction to make decisions like that at that age too, and Like,
Junior high school, man.
yeah, uh, like for a long time, I was for a long time I would have been in that age bracket. Now I'm, slightly out of the age bracket. And, when I hear people that are 18, 19 doing things, it's like, wow, that was like 2 years ago for me. Like, how do I have access to all the information I have now and haven't done what they're doing? It's insane. And it's really like, those are the types of stories that are just, it almost seems like they'll never be repeated again. But then new things come out every day, and at some point somewhere there's going to be some person that is so all in on the thing that is new, but or maybe not new, but they're all in on the thing. They're passionate about the thing, and no one else is passionate. And time comes, and the story will flip, and
Yeah.
things like this will be reborn. Maybe not in Pokemon per se, but with other, like something else, it might be. And then at some point, two other people just like you and me will be having the same conversation down the line
Yeah, and I
about.
didn't want to say your age. I knew you were pretty young, but you're doing some big things at a super young age too, which is kudos,
No,
man. And I
no,
think
thank
you
you.
have, I think the future for you in this hobby is extremely bright. I think you got a long ways to run, man.
Thank you. No, I appreciate it. I was gonna say the other thing I was thinking about, I kind of forgot it. Oh, I think originally I was listening to some of like what Scott was saying about these like trophy cards, and I was like I don't get it. Like, I understand the actual, like, well, I guess they're all trophies in one way or another, but like I understand like first place trainer card, second place because it came from the game. But when we're talking about these like snap promos and like Kangaskhan's and all this stuff, I just never understood it. And that's where some of the like rarity came. And then even some of these, like, at the time no one even knew that they existed. Like, that's part of how it became so rare at the
Yeah, the
time.
Snap Magic card's a perfect example. We didn't see that card. It took 20 years for that card for the first one to pop up, you know?
Right. Yeah. And I don't it's just hearing stories like that is just so crazy. Are there any other ones that stick out to you as like super memorable?
I mean, there's a lot of like little ones. I've been very blessed to have a lot of people on and like to hear everybody's backstories. Like you mentioned Z and G, like Z and G has a good one. Just you know, he started off, he had very little seed money and
Right.
worked his way up into, just I think he talks about getting one collection he bought
At a
for like
gas
200
station.
bucks, grinded, sold it for like 205, and then worked his way up until he had a couple Neo Genesis boxes, and then there was somebody who was selling a first edition booster box, and then he had a couple Gen boxes. He reached out to the person selling that first ed box, said, "Listen, these Neo Gen boxes are probably going to be way more liquid than that first edition box. Do you want to make a trade?" And then the person said no, couldn't move the first edition boxes. A couple months later, they reached out to James, said, "Okay, we'll do this trade." James was the smaller seller, had to blind send these boxes to the person. They ended up sending that first edition box to him. So I forget the number. I think he said it was valued at like 70 grand at the time, 70 to 90. And then Logan Paul ended up opening his first edition booster box. So James was like, "Oh, this will be funny. Let me message Logan Paul or tag him or whatever with his first edition box." It was like, "Hey, Logan Paul, like if you're interested in this box, like here it is." Like as a joke. And then sure as shit, Logan Paul reaches out to him like via DM and says, "Yeah, I want to buy your booster box." And then James flies out to California to meet Logan Paul. Like that's one of those stories I love. Or the same time as Rusty, TCA Gaming, he mailed his first edition booster box to Logan Paul. And it had signature confirmation and all this stuff. The FedEx driver just left it right outside the door. This is I think they never like officially said what the dollar amount is, but I think it was like between 330, $350,000 Rusty sold that booster box for. So you
Yeah.
got a potentially $350,000 booster box just sitting in front of Logan Paul's fence. Like anybody could have walked and stole that box and made hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like I love little stories like that, which are just awesome. And then, one of the stories I love, like that Rusty tells me is, uh, he saw these weird cards on eBay, and they were expedition cards, and it was like the Clefairy, the Charizard, the Blastoids, the Arbok, but they had this weird thing on it. It said like 4 position only. So Rusty saw these cards. He's never seen these cards before. So he reaches out he buys the cards and he gets them, and they say for 4 position only on it. And then he reaches out to the seller and finds out that the seller is an old WotC employee. And then Rusty discovers 4 position only cards, right? Like that's, which now we know 4 position only cards as being like,
Oh, PK, I might have lost you, or you might have lost me. Oh,
oh,
there we
there
go.
you go. Yeah, sorry. I don't know why.
Oh.
It's like freezing once in a while.
No, no problem.
But yeah, man, I love these stories. But yeah, I think I guess we'll probably start wrapping up the chat. We went for a little while.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's amazing. I think I am curious what kind of got you into the content space with the live streams.
Oh, COVID, man. Being home. I was locked down, nobody was doing anything. I was started going down the rabbit hole watching YouTube content because I wasn't doing anything. I
Mhm.
was going to work during the day and then coming home because you couldn't do anything. We were in lockdown. And then I was like, you know what? I think I could make some fun, like educational videos. That's what I originally wanted to do, educational videos. And that's where the name comes from. And I personally
Yeah.
hate the name of my channel, Poke Knowledge Cards, because I think it comes off as like, in a way, condescending. And that's why I like when people call me PK and not Poke Knowledge. So I started making videos, and then it just slowly grew into me started doing like rant videos. And then once I
Mm.
started doing these rants, I was like, you know what? This is the content I want to make. I want to do the rants. And then I did my first ever live because I never showed my face. I had like memes popping up. I said, okay, if I'm going to talk about Pokemon and I want people to take me seriously, because a lot of my critiques towards other people were they don't show their face. And I was like, I don't show my face. How can my
Right.
critique be what I'm not doing? So I did my first ever live, and then Mason Cardinal Gaming was helped me out a ton at the beginning. He was the first ever guest I had on my channel.
Mhm.
So Mason hopped on. We had a one-on-one live, and I really, really enjoyed it. And if it wasn't for Mason hopping on that first live, like I wouldn't be having guests on all the time. And then it just snowballed into where the channel is today, which my channel's still very small, but like I'm super proud of it. I'm super proud of the community and stuff. So
Yeah. No, that's amazing, and kudos to Mason. I think Mason's done a lot of like going on smaller channels too, like even beginning of channels. So super kudos to Mason. That's really cool that it kind of inspired you to do it. And then what kind of I feel like I'm like the worst person for this because I just always keep asking questions when things are supposed to wrap. But the what did you kind of do to educate yourself in the beginning? Like, did you do a lot of E4 combing or just like YouTube or different
so
forum boards? Like, what kind of got you into it?
yeah, so at the very, very beginning, I was definitely like a hardcore lurker on E4. I was a little late. I never saw the Poke Gym days and all that stuff that those people talk about. I never experienced that, but I do like a lot of I was doing a lot of Bulbapedia at the time, just
Hmm.
searching stuff, a lot of just eBay things. I got a Silver Bible, one of the things I recommend to everybody out there get, like listening to some of these really early videos, watching your gem mint Pokemons. Again, the guy who I talked about, MK Poke CC, the reason I had him on my channel was because he was doing investment videos before investment videos existed. Like,
Right.
so I started watching these guys, and I was just a passive watcher. And then, like I said, because of COVID, I just got super bored. And if that never happened, if the lockdowns never happened, this channel doesn't exist. And I would just be a guy collecting cards, selling cards, like in the background. And the crazy thing is I do believe that there are so many people like that just sitting in the background. You'll never know their name because they don't show their face. You've never heard them on a live. You've never seen them in a live chat. right now we got 93 viewers. When this video is all said and done, it will have 2,000 views. Out of those 2,000 views, maybe 200 of them will ever have commented on the video. That means 1,800 of those people watch these videos. They absorb this content. They're selling cards. They're flipping cards. They're doing all this stuff in the background. You never know they exist. And if COVID never happened, I would just be one of those 1,800. So.
No, it is kind of incredible to think. I mean, to think that there are people out there that could have been just like me a couple years ago, where I was just looking for content, like anything I could get my hands on. Like, I remember the thirst that I had to like try and just learn stuff. The fact that there could be more of me out there is like insane. And when I was doing the Pokemon business thing, like my YouTube channel, I was kind of thinking like, I feel like I'm like really, really niche down. I have my community and consistent viewership, stuff like that, and it's good. And then I made one video, I think it's titled "I Tried Selling Pokemon Cards for 30 Days." I think the video right now has like 25,000 views. I had no idea that so many people would be interested in that topic, like the topic alone, like selling Pokemon cards. I don't know. To me, it just like didn't dawn on me that was possible. And to think, if we sit here and like theorize, of 25,000 people that saw that video, like how many Wills are there from 3 years ago that would want to be in the same position today, or like just like they have a thirst for collectibles and they want to do something like this. It's wild to think about.
It is wild. And like when people ask me why I'm most bullish about the hobby, is the thing I'm most bullish about is about those 1,800 people that I've never one time seen them comment in the chat. And how can you say you're so bullish about, because that is literally like the most intangible possible thing that exists, is just numbers to a video. So how can something like that be what you're truly the most bullish about? But I'm most bullish about those people. And there's just some stuff that this hobby does time after time, sale after sale, things like that, that you almost think in a way it's unrepeatable. There's no way another new set comes out and booster boxes come unavailable at distribution. There's no way. Pokemon companies printing, demands dropping, and time after time, set after set, release after release, it happens over and over again. And I say, okay, like I feel so comfortable with what I'm doing, which is also the definition of, in a way, like being in a bubble, or the definition of being like overly like optimistic on stuff. Like I find myself a lot of times like pulling myself back, and people a lot of times take that as negativity. Like,
sure,
PK doesn't like modern, PK doesn't like this. It's like, no. Be very clear to like what I'm doing, versus I'm just warning you that things, in my opinion, can't just go up in perpetuity forever. Evolving Skies cannot 2x every year from now until infinity, because it's a $300 booster box today. Next year, if it's 600, 900, 1,200, or I'm sorry, to double, I should say double. You go from 3 to 6 to 12 to 24 to 48. That's not a $4,800 booster box in 4 years, So what I try to do is just like realistic expectations. What can it really do? Let's look at the history. And then it's so hard to pull back and look at the history and look at a super well performing booster box like a Flash Fire, right? Flash Fire, you don't got to go back that far. Flash Fire, what is Flash Fire? Well, it's like a $3,000 plus booster box. But what was the timeline like? What was the release like? What was the demand like? What was the print numbers like? And then people just get mad when you start to do these comparisons. So sometimes I'm just like, okay, we're just going to go for the ride,
Yeah, I think it's also, I learned this a lot about like trying to study finance and stuff. A lot of this stuff is not fact, and a lot of it is assumptions and trying to guess things that are going to happen. And in in my opinion, if there's someone that's trying to sell you on the like, this is the way, this is the only way, they have no idea what they're talking about. Like no one does. And it's almost better to just say no one has any idea what's going on,
Yeah.
because you literally have no idea. And
I
like
well,
I made a video.
I'll speculate.
Yeah, of course, we can speculate all day. I made a video talking about why I sold Evolving Skies, and in my opinion, I had an argument that I thought was sound. Has to deal with rotation of the trading card game and like the print cycle of Evolving Skies, the timeline it's been out, and my hypothesis was I think we'll see a reprint. And there wasn't an ulterior motive. It was just like, this is the argument I prepared, and this is my belief, and this is what I'm doing. I'm okay if I'm wrong, because at the end of the day, I made a choice. But I wasn't like, you have to do this. And I think it's important to know, like, no one knows what's
Yeah.
going to happen. And sure, there's things that are like highly unlikely that would happen. Like, they're not going to just come and, well, hopefully not, reprint first edition base set tomorrow and just be like, hey guys, we have like this back catalog of stuff we never told you about, and we're just going to dump it. Like,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty unlikely. But one of the most important things one of the smartest people I work with told me, and then he said this is from smarter people that he worked with when he was in investment banking, is the smartest investors always look for a reason why something can go wrong. And it's like the smartest guy in the room was never the guy that's like, yeah, we're going to the moon, everything's going up, like this is all good, everything's happy-go-lucky. It was always the guy that's like, sure, that's what's happening, but what can go wrong? And having a degree of skepticism with things is like, I think that's a good way to look at stuff. But at the end of the day, we're talking about cardboard, and as long as you're passionate about it, I think it's okay.
Yeah, man. And on that note, I think we're gonna end this. Will, I really, really enjoyed this live. And if you're ever up to it in the future, man, I would love to have you back on this channel. And maybe get you on with some other people too. Maybe we'll get Mason on and hear you guys kind of bounce ideas off each other, because I think you're doing something awesome in this space. And again, to everybody out there watching this video, real time or after the fact, in the description below, the very first link is the Lab TCG. I recommend you guys clicking on his channel, giving him subscribe. Hopefully we could get him pumping out more than one video a week, but fingers crossed there, guys. But yeah, with that said, I don't like to ever talk for my guests, but I feel I can talk for this. Listen, guys, we appreciate every single one of you guys out there. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be making these type of videos. And I know I can't thank you enough, and I'm sure Will can't thank you guys enough. The fact that you guys watched it, especially if you made it to the end of this video, you guys are the ultimate goats out there. With that
Yeah,
said, appreciate every single one of you guys. Will, do you have any final words?
absolutely. PK, it's been a pleasure. I'd love to come on more live and meet some of these people I've watched videos for years. So that'd be super
Yeah,
cool.
man.
Thank you so much for having me on. And again, to everyone that's watching, whether you're a collector, investor, want to run a business, or just love Pokemon cards, thank you so much for being here and supporting the content that both PK and I make. And yeah, my email and DMs are open. If you have any questions about anything I said, feel free to message me. And yeah, thanks so much.
All right, guys. As always, we'll catch you on the next video.